Hey, I'm Devin,
And I'm Mary Kate,
and we're picking up pieces
a channel all about board game pieces.
and how to pick them up. And in today's video, we got an interview with Paul Elpers, the designer of Gempire.
So, Gempire is a game coming to Kickstarter, coming up in the next couple of...
September 26th. See, I'm a constant professional, while Mary Kate over here, not even trying.
Hey, I just forgot, all right?
So, with Paul, we had him here. We filmed the how to play with him, and then we got tired, and we just decided to do this via telecommunications, Zoom. Yeah. And so, here's Zoom with Paul. Let's do it. All right. Hey, guys, this is Paul Elpers, the designer of Gempire. And today, we got this interview questions to give to you guys. So, Paul, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, let's get it. All right, so first, what got you into the board game hobby, Paul?
What got me into it? I don't know. I guess growing up, we didn't really have internet. We lived in a rural area without, we had dial-up, but it was so bad that we couldn't really use it. And so I also grew up with a big family, so it was really easy to find people to do stuff with that wasn't online stuff. So we played a lot of games outdoors. We played a lot of board games. And I think, that time when you play Catan for the first time, and then you're like, oh my gosh, this is so much better than everything else I've ever played.
Yeah.
Even though, once you get really deep into the hobby, you almost even forget about Catan. But I think that was probably when I was in about 8th grade. And I don't know, it just seemed like a nerdier version of all the games that I had played, and I liked that. And so, and my brothers and I were all pretty close in age, and we all really like math. So it kind of just snowballed, I think, from there.
Yeah. So you started playing games, and was it like a specific moment of what it was? It like playing Catan that got you into the hobby? You know what I'm saying?
I think so. I was the second youngest of my siblings. And so I had 2 older brothers. And so they were a little bit more in the time of their life where they could start paying for stuff themselves when I was still in grade school and in high school. So, when you can't really drive anywhere, you just kind of do what your siblings are doing. You just kind of do what the people around you are doing. So my brothers kept buying more and more games. They had a lot of the games, a lot of card games, like Star Wars card games, and the little Hero Clicks type, and Lord of the Rings skirmish games and stuff like that growing up. But those were the ones that you had to get really deep into and buy a whole bunch of pieces for. I think he started branching out and looking for a ton of more games, and so he just kept buying more and more of them. It opens a whole new world to you. You have no idea any of this stuff exists, and you're like, what? This is awesome.
Yeah.
So follow-up question, what is your favorite game?
That's a tough one.
This is weird because I love strategy games, but they're so hard. They're so hard to design, in my opinion, without having that one thing that kind of, I don't want to say ruins it, but that one little flaw that kind of keeps it from being perfect. And I don't know. I know this isn't really a strategy game, but it has to be Blood on the Clock Tower.
There's so much strategy involved in it. Obviously,
there is strategy.
It's a lot of you got to be tactical. You're speaking to the choir. We love Blood on the Clock Tower.
It's so hard to get a game set up, but I love the immersion of it. It puts me into that serious mindset where, everybody in the group is there for the same reason and taking it seriously, especially when everybody's there taking it seriously. It's really immersive. And I really like that. I think one of my pet peeves about games is when I'm playing them and somebody's on their phone or doesn't really want to be there. Or even when somebody really doesn't care about winning. And I don't make winning my top priority, but playing with people who want to win makes it a lot more fun because they're all there for the same reason, and they're all trying to beat you. And that to me makes it a lot more fun than somebody who just couldn't care less to be there, and just kind of I'll just make this move, even though I know it's a stupid move. I'd rather play with people who are there for this, for the same reasons that you're there.
with that talking about your favorite board game, do you have a favorite mechanic?
No, I don't think so. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been asked this question before on Twitter a couple
Mm-hmm.
years ago. And I remember what I answered for it. I said, my favorite mechanics are the ones that haven't been made yet.
Mm.
Because for me, I like if I hear that a game uses a mechanic that I've seen before, it almost makes me less curious to try it. Because
Mm-hmm.
although they might have tweaked it to make it a little different, it's still I in my mind I'm like, okay, well, I kind of already know something about that game now. Like it's going to give me not a completely new experience as opposed to something that just uses mechanics that I completely haven't seen before. Now, I guess Blood on the Clock Tower, there are a bunch of those trader games out there. None of them do it like Blood on the Clock Tower at all. You know, like you get to
Mm-hmm.
keep playing when you're dead. Like there's reasons to lie when you're good. You know, that game just does it so beautifully. And every other time that I've played a game like that, it's been everyone just says they're good. You know, if
Mm-hmm.
you're bad, you say you're good. If you're good, you say you're good. There's no reason to lie when you're good. And like there's so many other games where it basically just comes down to I'm just guessing whether this guy is lying or not. In that
Yeah.
game, like I feel like you can totally tactically target your lies and stuff to make people believe different things to like make you either survive longer or if you're one of the characters that wants to die, you know, try to get the demon to kill you so you can
Yeah.
use your power. So like that game just felt totally different to me because it threw all of those abilities into the game that do completely different stuff. So although like the core mechanic was the same, put so many different roles and abilities in there that do different things that it made it feel like a completely different game, I guess.
Yeah. And there's so many, and there's actually roles in that game, even though this is side topic now, roles in that game, like good roles, what you want to die.
Yeah,
Like you were saying,
which is
hinting at
fantastic.
earlier.
Which is fantastic. I mean, like those are the times when you like you're the Raven Keeper and you want to die and you let
Yeah.
it slip that
Mm-hmm.
you're the Undertaker because you know, well, if the demon catches the rumor that you're the Undertaker, he's taking you out, and then you're like,
Mm-hmm.
eh, I was actually the Raven Keeper.
Yeah.
I wanted
It's
you to kill me.
fantastic, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, in most of those games when you're good, there's no reason to lie, but in that game, there is reason to lie even if you are good, and I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely makes things a lot more complex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, thinking through Blood on the Clock Tower is your favorite game. How has your taste of games as a whole changed or developed over your time playing board games?
Okay, so starting out when you just find out about the huge world of board games, you're in such awe. You're experiencing all these mechanics for the first time, and because they're new to you, it feels incredible. That's what I'm still after, but because there's less new stuff to me anymore, it's harder to find that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you're just starting out, you know, Seven Wonders is your first drafting game, and then you know, you've got like Agricola as your first worker placement game, you know, so like, and you're seeing all these mechanics for the first time, and they're so much better than everything else you've already experienced and different, and you're like, this is amazing. Like every time I play a new game, I get to have a completely new experience, right? And so I think starting out, I was just in awe of everything, of how much fun everything was.
Mhm.
Um, but I have my three brothers we're all very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times when we would get done playing games, after we got so far into the hobby, we would always have a chat after each game ended. And we would be like, okay, well, I kind of felt like the game really just hinged on this one thing, or I felt like, you know, this part of the game is a little overpowered, and if you ignore that, you're probably going to lose, or just we always had common or like conversations after the game about what our thoughts were, and like if we played it again, I think, you know, I would take that strategy because it worked that time. And I think, and a lot of those conversations were really enlightening. And also, I think after a while, I cooled on the games where you target people. Now targeting as a mechanic isn't bad if it's a two-player game and the other person is the only person you can target. That's different, right? I mean, that's fine. But in a 3 or 4 player game, targeting until somebody pulls out in front, it just kind of feels like it's a random decision who you're going to target, or maybe even personal. And sometimes people take it personally. Like it's really easy to take being targeted personally in a 3 or 4 person game, and then it starts arguments. And then when we play with my brothers, then it's like, okay, well, my younger brother's winning, so everybody's going to target him because he's winning. Because everybody wants to have the chance to come back and win the game, so everybody's going to attack him until he's not winning anymore, and then somebody else pulls out in front, and then we attack him. So
Yeah.
I think I cooled on those games because like it felt too mean, it felt too personal, and it also kind of made you feel like there was no point in pulling out ahead, because you knew that if you did, you were going to get attacked anyway, and there wasn't much you could do about it against 3 other people who wanted your head. So I think I cooled on those pretty quick. I think the next thing I kind of cooled on was games that take forever. So games that take 3+ hours, right? Like I think I cooled on those pretty quick. But I think I've come around to like games for what their purpose is. So I used to say, I only like strategy games. And now, like, I wouldn't consider Blood on the Clock Tower a strategy game. There's strategy in it, but it's a party game. Strategy heavy party game, I guess. So, but I like games. I still like games that aren't necessarily strategy games, as long as the game's not trying to be a strategy game and it's not 2 hours long. I still like Yahtzee. I still love Yahtzee. Like, honestly, Yahtzee is one of those games I'll pull out anytime and just play by myself. And I think I don't go into Yahtzee thinking, oh, I'm ready for a strategy game.
Yeah.
I go into Yahtzee and I know it's a luck game, but it's thrilling to see how high of a score I can get. You know what I mean? Like, maybe this is the game that I'm going to get 500. Maybe this is the game where I'm going to get 700. You don't know. How many Yahtzees are you going to get today? You could hit the lottery and get 6 Yahtzees in a game, So like,
yeah.
And just, I think the chance that you might see something crazy happen in that game is what keeps me coming back to it. And so I think, like, I don't know. I think my tastes have changed too. I used to just like strictly strategic games, and I would get frustrated when there was some element in the game that was heavily luck based, and seemed like at the end it really just mattered what card you drew or how well you rolled the dice or whatever. And I think now I've come around to, if a game is short enough, I make more of an effort to enjoy it for what it's meant to be.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was it that made you want to design games? You just got done talking about your tastes. What made you want to make that leap?
That's a good question. It's so long ago, it's hard to even remember. Like, when you do this type of stuff, you lose track of how much you've changed as a person and what you used to be like before you started. But I think what got me into game design was we played a lot of Euros. They all started feeling kind of similar. Like, it just felt like a lot of resource management, building stuff, and then at the end of the game, you count your victory points and you see who has the most. And I don't know. I guess, like, I knew there were more mechanics out there that weren't in any of the games that we were playing. So it was just kind of like, why can't I do that? Like, all these people who design these games, where do I think they started from? I mean, they started just as a regular person like anybody else. And there's no reason why I can't just decide to start making something. And that's, like, actually one thing that I wish that more people just realized in general is, like, I wasn't in any sort of special circumstance to start this. It was like, I literally just decided one day that I wanted to add something new to the board game world. Like I wanted to make a game that didn't have the same mechanics, that didn't make any of the what I considered to be flaws at the time in games. Didn't make any of those flaws. It has, doesn't really have room for leader bashing or targeting or anything like that. So I was also thinking about, outside of the realm of board games, what are the games that people like? What are some of the games that blew up? And like, what are some games that people just consider to be awesome and they just continue to play them over and over again? Civilization came to mind. And it's kind of like, okay, well, I mean, that's not a board. It is a board game now, but
yeah,
it started out, wasn't a board game, but like people really, really love that game. It's a video game that plays as if it's a board game, right? So, but it's kind of like, okay, like that's a game that doesn't die. Like people love that game, and it's on Civ 6. There's a reason it's on Civ 6 because it doesn't die, because people love it.
It's a good game.
Right. And so like, but like there's a reason it doesn't die. It's replayable, and people feel like they can play it differently every time. And that's why people love it. And so if I can make a game that people feel like every time they get out onto the table, it's completely different every time, people are going to love that. I wanted to give people that game, like the game that they put on their shelf, and that's like, you can make that your go-to. Like, this is going to be completely different every time. And although the concept is the same every time, you're going to have to approach it completely differently. And I think that thought made me want to get into game design. Is I wanted to try to make the game that people didn't want to sell, or, didn't get tired of.
I like it. So what was your inspiration specifically for Gempire? Like, how did you come up with the idea for it?
You want to know the first thing that I came up with? Was I was driving home from work, and I was at a stoplight, and most games you roll dice and you get the resources on the dice or whatever, and a lot of it comes down to, can you roll the dice well? Can you roll the resources that you need? I'm not a big fan of that, because that introduces a whole lot of luck to the game. So I was like, well, what if you had a resource roll, but it just applied to everyone around the table? And so I was like, well, that would be kind of cool, because then, it wouldn't be dependent on your luck of the roll. I mean, everybody's getting the same roll. So like, so the first idea that I came up with at the stoplight was, what if you had a simple idea where there's all these resources on these dice that somebody rolls, and that gives everybody the option to either take what was rolled, or you can use your stuff that you currently have to bid on stuff out in the middle. And so the mind game of like, oh, geez, if that roll is really good, do I take the roll because it's really good? Or do I use that to my advantage and assume that everybody else is taking the roll? And that means I don't have to bid against people because they're taking the roll. And I was like, that sounds really fun. Like, just that mind game of like, am I going to take all that? Or am I going to be like the person who goes in and snatches everything while everybody's taking that? So that was the first thing I came up with. And then I think I knew that I wanted it to be like a city builder. So I kind of went from there. And I think the second concept that I came up with is, I'm going to have a whole bunch of victory conditions and technologies that I'm going to throw into the game. There's going to be way more than necessary for one game. And you're just going to draw however many random for the beginning of the game for that game, and then you only use those. And so every time you play, you draw completely random ones. And I think that was the second thing I came up with. And then it just kind of snowballed. So the population, gold, and culture, what those were going to do, the districts rule with, you can only have 3 districts in a row. You can build a second row. It just kind of snowballed from there. And it actually, I didn't even have the cities until the very end. So I made the entire game just on basically you're building your city and trying to make it the capital of the Gempire. But I added that little bit of flavor at the end where I actually came up with names for the cities and had everybody playing as the lead architect of a specific city. And I came up with that right at the end. I didn't know what to call it for the longest time. And one of my playtest groups, after they were done, as a joke, said Gempire, and everybody cracked up because it sounded really cheesy at the time. Like it sounded hilarious. It was like, haha, good one, like I'm gonna shrug that one off,
Yeah.
But then it was like, but then it was like a week goes by and you're still thinking about the name and you just keep going back to Gempire. And like you keep coming up with these names. And you're like, that's not as good as Gempire though. And you come up with another one. You're like, that's not as good as Gempire though. Like Gempire just kind of survived. Like nothing could take it down. And I came up with Zarman's Demands was the second best name that I came up with. So I couldn't decide whether to call it Zarman's Demands or Gempire. And then somebody was like, you could just do that colon thing where you put Gempire colon Demands. I was like, that works. I'm going to go with that. So I think I came up with the main mechanic first, and then the general theme. And then I came up with the rest of the mechanics, and then I added style to the theme at the end, if that makes sense.
That's really interesting, actually. I loved hearing that whole story. Yeah. For me as a nerd, I was all about it.
I loved that you were like, Gempire, nah. And then every other name, but that's not as good.
That's not as good. And so I have a list of guys in the back of the rule book called the 5 Great Architects. And I named them the 5 Great Architects because they've played this game probably 300 times. And when I told them the name Gempire, they had the same reaction. They cracked up and they were like, no, there's no way we're calling it Gempire. And then I don't know, like after a month or two, people just kept calling it Gempire. And so like they would text and just be like, hey, can you bring Gempire over? It wasn't even called Gempire at that point, but they would just say, hey, can you bring Gempire over? I was like, eventually I've got to be like, okay, that's the winner. It gets the point across of what the game is. It adds a little bit of style to the game and maybe just a little bit of humor. And I kind of like that, along with the tag name at the bottom. That's a game of endless stratagems.
Yeah.
Yeah. It worked out. I'm happy with it.
That's good. So what sets Gempire apart from other games?
That's a good question. I'm gonna go. There's a few things.
I thought you were going to say, Paul. I'm gonna have to come back to that one. I thought that's what you were about to say.
What? So I'm gonna have to say, well, number one, the victory conditions change every time, and that's, I think, the biggest thing about that game, about Gempire, is that the victory conditions not only change every time, but you only have to get 2 out of 3. So the fact that they change every time makes every game completely different. And the fact that you only need 2 out of 3 means that everyone can play the game differently and approach it differently and still end the game neck and neck, but you went for completely different strategies because there's a lot of different ways to win the game. So the other is, I don't know of like a strategy game that has as little downtime as Gempire does because of the simultaneous turn taking. And I also like the fact that the strategy is really deep, but it's also not analysis paralysis inducing. So number one, there's not like a whole lot of cards that have a whole bunch of text on them. The only cards that really have text that you have to read on them are the demands and the technologies, but those are out from the very beginning. So once you read those a few times, you have to look at them to remind yourself, but it's not like games where you're drawing more cards and they all have, paragraphs on them that describe what they do. Right. So all the building cards are just values, so it doesn't take there's not a whole lot of like homework as far as like reading stuff. And there's only 3 actions. Now the way that you implement those actions is varied, but there's a whole bunch of reasons why you would do each action, but there's still only 3, which means that you don't have to sit there and you don't have to, consider like 20 different actions that you could do and try to be like, okay, now which one's my optimal action here?
Yeah.
I got counted off from this for somebody who rated Gempire on Board Game Geek said, it's a jumbled mess as you all try to grab your pieces at the same time. in my opinion, I like the fact that other people are getting their stuff while I'm getting my stuff.
Yeah.
Because it cuts down on the downtime. I mean, like we played three games in like 3 to 4 hours. You do a lot in that game for only taking about an hour. The simplicity, but also with the depth of how you can approach the game. There's the strategy is so deep, but the concept is so simple.
Yeah.
And it makes it feel not overwhelming, but like you can approach the game in a ton of different ways, which is what I really like about it.
Yeah, because the game has so much variation, like all the variation you're talking about, and there's more on top of that they have to set up differently every single game, and none of it is asymmetric. Like everyone's having to deal with that variation the same way, but everyone's going to deal with that uniquely.
Yes, that's beautifully put. Like that's honestly beautifully put, because I like symmetry. I like the symmetry, but when you have symmetry, you risk people having the same strategies. That does not happen in this game. Like I said, because you only have to get 2 of the 3 victory conditions, there are tons of ways to win this game, and people's strategies diverge naturally, like a lot in this game. So even though everybody starts out with the same stuff and is going for the same stuff and can get the same stuff, people don't. They don't go for the same stuff. And it's really, really cool to see 2 people or even 3 people who go for completely different things, and they end the game neck and neck. Like one person was only a turn behind, and another person was only a couple turns from winning. And even though they went for completely different strategies, one person might have an 8-card city with no second row, and another guy might have 10 cards in both rows, and has discovered 4 technologies, and this guy over here just upgraded his palace 3 times. So like so it's really cool to me to see, even with it being symmetrical, how differently everybody plays the game, and from game to game, how the strategies change.
Yeah. And then going back to I also wanted to hit on the simultaneous. It's like not just the fact that it's simultaneous, but how fast it happens. Like it's like everyone writes what they're going to do, reveal it, get what they want, and then goes on. And all that can happen within like seconds.
Yeah.
Like as the game goes on, it's going to take longer because the decisions you make are more impactful. And so it's going to lead to longer decision taking. But like at the beginning of the game, it can just be like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Like you've already done like 8 turns in the game like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next question, Mary Kate, is
what has been the most gratifying part about designing a board game?
Gratifying has to be when I go to like a playthrough session and people kind of forget why they're there. Like it just becomes another game night. Not like I don't want to make it sound like it's just another game night, but like when they forget that they're like, when they forget that they're playing your game, like, and it just starts to feel to them like it's just a game that they bought. Or especially like when they get that look of like, they get the wide eyes, and you can see them like holding their book like tightly, like thinking about their decisions, and you're like, they're really into this right now. This is really cool. That's got to be that, along with people at Gen Con who come back and they're like, I played this last year, I had so much fun with it.
That's all that helps.
It has to be easily the most gratifying feeling about designing a board game, because that's the reason why you went through it all. Like you went through it all so that people could enjoy it, and now you're finally getting to meet the people who enjoy it.
So like how many hours have you put towards the game?
I would say probably 15,000.
That's a lot of hours.
Yeah, I would say
more than 2.
Probably 40 hours a week for the past 5 to 6 years.
Wow,
it's a lot of time. All right, speaking of time, I've got to head out. Are you going to keep?
Yep, I'm going to keep doing this.
Devin's going to keep asking you questions.
Okay, that's fine with me.
YouTube's just a side thing. We still got regular jobs.
It was nice talking with you, Paul.
Yeah, it was great, Mary Kate.
I'm keeping this in for the video too, just FYI.
I'm sure she'd rather be in this meeting, but Uh,
I mean, I could be, but work calls.
All right, so let's get on to the next question then. What has been the most challenging part about making designing a board game?
There's challenging in different ways. So the most challenge, like designing the game itself, is really challenging because you go a lot of days where you don't come up with anything that you're happy with. And so there's a lot of days where you feel like you literally made no progress. And that is so frustrating. It's so frustrating to work so hard, but also feel like you didn't make any progress. Then comes the waiting of like the art to be done. And I actually did the art in the first edition of this game. So that took me like 10 months. And like, because I wanted to come up with something that looked good. So I went through a whole lot of like, I worked on the art and I tried to make something that I liked. And then I would have several iterations of it. And I would show people and I'd be like, do you like this one or this one? And they'd have to choose. And I would have to decide in my head if I agree with them and, make decisions based on that. And that took a long time. That took a very long time. And then comes the business side of it, which just bores the heck out of me. It's so boring. Like I understand why most people get done with the design and they hand it off to a publisher, right?
Yeah.
Like I get that now. But I also felt going in, like if I was willing to put up with all the struggles of doing what a publisher would do, that why wouldn't I just publish it myself and not have to split that profit with them? If you go with a publisher, you're only getting 5% of what they, 5% of their margins. So like, that's a lot to give up, so
yeah,
after going through all of that struggle designing it. So it's very time consuming and very boring, and you have to teach yourself a lot of stuff that you don't want to learn because it's boring. But I think the most difficult part is not even something that I can point to. It's more of the fact that if you have a full-time job other than this, that like I do, it's more of the fact that it takes away so much of your time that you could be spending with other people. And you just kind of have to be okay with that. It gets lonely because I don't know that many people that are going through this. And most of the people that I know personally don't really understand what it's like to dedicate this much time to designing a game. Now, the thing is most people know what it's like to dedicate a lot of time and effort to something, right? But not a lot know what they can't relate to it being specifically designing a game, right? So like most people have a family, or like most people raise kids, and that takes a ton of time and effort. But that's also something that a lot of people do. So they have those shared experiences, and they can come to each other for support, for emotional support. And when you care about something like this as much as I do, and it feels like a lot of times you can't find that other person that you can talk to that understands how much you care about it. You know what I mean? It can get kind of lonely, and that I think is the hardest part. I feel like I have a lot of people who support me, but at the same time, I feel like anytime I go into a lot of detail about how much I care about about this project, I'm just boring people and they don't want to hear about it. Maybe I'm projecting that on to them. So I usually try to keep it to a minimum. But that also, like I said, makes it kind of lonely because I don't have those people that, I feel like I can talk to as much as I would like about it, and they understand that and they can relate to what I'm going through. So I think that's probably generally the hardest part about the entire experience. But I guess if you were wanting an answer as to what's the most challenging part of designing specifically the game, I don't know that I have an answer for that because I wasn't really stuck on any one part for way too long.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that'll change with my next game. But
And I think you pretty much got what I was asking. You answered it, because I include that in the designing the board game process. Like all of that is a process. It's not just not just mechanics. It's like everything that goes into it, artwork and everything you talked about.
yeah.
So from like those experiences, from like your challenges and the gratifying moments, what would you tell aspiring board game designers?
Oh, okay. I have 4 things that I tell people who want to get into game design.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll come up with more in the future. But what I always tell people who are thinking about getting into game design is, number 1, you don't need anything to tell you that you're capable of it. So you don't need a certificate. You don't need an authoritative person to tell you that you can do it. Okay, so you can start whenever the heck you want to, and whenever the heck you want to. That ties into the second thing, which is, don't wait until it feels like the right time to start, because it will never feel like the right time to start. You will have to start when your life feels like you're way behind on everything, and there's no way you're going to catch up with everything, and you're stressed, and you're going to have to start when you don't want to. That's just how it goes. It's never going to feel like the right time. So don't wait for it to feel like it is. The third thing is, know exactly why you are making your game before you start it. So I knew that I was making Gempire because I wanted something that didn't reuse old mechanics, and I wanted something that people didn't get tired of after 5 plays. They didn't learn the patterns. They used a different strategy every single time. I wanted to make a game like that with original mechanics, and they never got tired of it. And so the reason you need to go in with a vision like that is because you're going to meet a lot of people throughout the design process. You're going to meet players who want to play it and then give you feedback. You're going to meet designers who want to play it and give you feedback. And they're all going to have feedback. Everyone has feedback, right? But feedback comes from people's preferences. And it might be good or bad. But your vision is what determines whether you should take it. So if all you do is you take feedback from people and you try to implement it, you'll never get your game out. You'll just be running around trying to please people for years, trying to implement this guy's suggestion and that girl's suggestion, and it'll take you forever. You're never going to please everybody. That's the thing, is you're never ever going to please everybody. But if you know why you're doing it, then that suggestion actually works toward my vision. That's a good suggestion. That one, not so much. I'll thank them for the suggestion, but you can't take every suggestion, especially if it doesn't work toward your vision. So your vision gives you direction. So you have to know before you start, why are you even putting this game into the market? What is it doing that other games don't do? And work and keep that in mind. And then number 4 is have somebody who's close to you that you can talk to as much as you want to about this, and they're not going to get tired of you, which it might be hard to find that person, but you need that person. So because a lot of the design process is you playing devil's advocate to your own ideas. Because you come up with ideas, you're like, oh, I like that. That's really good. And then you'll be talking to the person, even if you're not even the one to bring it up. You might just be like, oh, well, wait, but if you had the option to do this or this, would you ever do this when this is on the board? And that person could be like, I probably wouldn't, and you'd be like, well, crap. Well, okay, well, then let's either throw that one away or find some way to make that not happen. But number 4, I would say, is have somebody that you can talk to that would be invested enough to hear what you have to say about it. It's not going to get tired of hearing about it.
Yeah.
It might be hard to find, but it helps a lot if you can have that person. So those are normally the 4 things that I tell people.
Good tips. Good tips.
Yeah.
And you've done it a couple times.
Yeah. I mean, and there's probably more, but I think generally those are the ones that people need to realize. So
Okay. So as we're wrapping up the interview, what would be your pitch for other people to get Gempire? Why should they get it September 26th whenever it hits Kickstarter?
okay, so you should get Gempire because you're never going to learn the patterns to Gempire, because every game you have new technologies, new victory conditions, new rewards for your palace upgrades, and they're all open from the very beginning. So they're all common knowledge. You can use them to your advantage for your long-term strategy. You can plan it out, and you can actually see it come to fruition because there's no direct attacking each other in this game. But I would say it's just a very deep strategic game that you're going to be able to play 100 times and you're never going to get tired of it. And on top of that, you don't have to wait 10 minutes for everybody else to go for it to be your turn. So if that sounds like a good thing to you, then check out Gempire. Not just because of the fact that I feel like it uses mechanics that aren't really in other games. I mean, that's the one common thing that I hear with a lot of people is they're like, this game is just really different. And
it's like the combination of the mechanics together that you have that makes it unique, because a lot of the mechanics just aren't usually combined together.
Right.
At all.
Well, like there's a lot of bidding in other games, but it's like everyone's bidding, right? And so, but in this game, you don't even know who's bidding. So it's all a mind game, and it's just a lot of fun.
And I was going to say that's the thing. Like, I don't think I know of another game doing is the secret bidding that you don't have to do every single turn. Yeah, and so that way you have to exercise that mind game thing. Is like I haven't seen that in another game before.
Yeah, and I also do really like the city building rules with the 3 districts, and you can build a second row or you can not build a second row. There's a lot of different decisions you get to make with your city building that I think leaves it open for a lot of strategic replayability. I built the game that I wanted to play, so I'm clearly biased, but but I just love a lot of aspects about it. But
I mean, the first time I played it was with you, and we legit played it 3 times that day. Because I wanted to play it, not because you were forcing me to play it. I was like, I want to beat the designer. Did I? No, not a chance.
Well, you kind of did.
I got close. Last game, guys, I forgot a rule that was important.
He forgot he could upgrade his palace, which would have won in the game. He forgot he could do it.
What an idiot. So I think that's going to wrap up this interview with Paul Elpers. If you guys want to contact him, here's his number. Be popped up on the screen.
There it is. I see it.
So until next time, guys. But more importantly, we value all of you. And if we had the chance, we love to play board games with every single one of you. See ya. Bye.